Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the podcast, where I bring you the best and the brightest from the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. My guest today is Gwen Whiting, the founder of the Laundress. Gwen graduated from Cornell University's Fiber Science Textile Apparel Management and Design program. There has to be an acronym for that. And worked for over a decade in fashion, retail, media, and design, namely spending a bulk of her time, about 5 years, as senior designer at Ralph Lauren. Gwen would eventually start the Laundress in 2004, along with her partner, Lindsay Boyd, using her insight and creative vision to innovate the dirty side of the fashion world by focusing on improving the stale laundry industry. The Laundress, which would eventually be acquired by Unilever in early 2019. Awesome. And Gwen and Lindsay still operate the Laundress from the original headquarters in New York City and continue to innovate and expand their focus on their global premium, eco-friendly line of detergent, fabric care, and home cleaning. And there's a ton of rich experience and wisdom to cover here, so let's dive right in. Gwen, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Adam. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. We have our technology set. We have our microphone set. We are good to go here. So let's start. So why don't we just bring my tribe, up to speed? And I love to understand where people's initial passions come from. My daughter, I see it in her right now with her creativity. She's 8.5 years old. She has an element of design. I get her aesthetic. She's big into that word aesthetic. She picks out what she likes. When did it really start for you? When did that passion into the fashion industry come about?
Well, I was always creative as a child and crafty, I would say. I couldn't get my hands on enough. I got a doll. I didn't want to play with it. I wanted to cut their hair or do their hair or dress them or whatever. But I was really more into not dolls, but anything knitting. I learned how to knit when I was 4 with my grandmother, needlepoint, craft, anything that was tactile and had a result, results oriented. But I was never that classic artist talent. So in arts, in art class, there's like the drawers and like the talented ones, making beautiful paintings. And that was not me. And I was frustrated because I had a vision that I wanted to execute, but I just didn't have that paper to pen execution, but I could create tangible things.
You could make things.
I could make things.
Kind of like a science lab, trying to figure things out and
Yeah.
and make it happen. And when you got into high school, did that continue? Did you take any fashion classes? 'Cause I know they're offered.
Yeah, so I actually sewed in high school. It's funny. I was just thinking about this morning. So I did gymnastics as a child. So when I wasn't in the gym, I was tinkering around trying to create interesting things on my free time. And my childhood gymnastics friend really inspired me to take that craft to. She was actually sewing clothes that were amazing and wearing them in high school. And true story, she's quite a notable person. Her name is Kia Tomlin, who is the wife of the Pittsburgh Steelers coach. So she was my my inspiration. I could take a creation at home that was wearable and fashionable. And so that led to, in high school, I took classes at FIT, and it was summer classes, Sunday classes, weekend classes.
Taking the train in.
You
felt cool going into the city. Yeah.
But my mom was driving me. She was like, I wasn't even allowed to do that.
Get out on the train. Yeah.
This is actually before it was direct train from where I lived in New Jersey. But anyhow, taking these classes and in retrospect, putting myself in incredibly uncomfortable situations. I did this fashion illustration class with, you can imagine, all of the tri-state kids who were talented at fashion illustration, which I was not. But I was putting myself in this situation so I could hone this skill for pen to paper, work to take you to the next level of actually creating. And I look back at that sketchbook, I still have it. And it was like so bad. I was like mortified, but
It's like
I
stick
did
figures.
it. I did it. And that, fast forward, I applied to Cornell. I also had a tie business in high school too, where I made neckties because we had a dress code.
Interesting.
And it started as gifts, and then it became high demand and everybody wanted one. And so launching a necktie business, which, actually paid for my first computer. So
Look at that.
there you go, results.
Yeah.
And then I applied to Cornell, early decision, and I got in, which was a bit of a stretch. And from there is an acronym. It's TXA, although it's been rebranded like 3 other times.
It's a mouthful.
Since
I mean, it really is.
It's a mouthful. It's a mouthful. But my major was apparel design. But because it was a liberal arts school, or still a Ivy League school, you had to do economics and all of the sciences and everything that went with it,
Right.
which included fiber science was part of my program. But I also knew that I had this design creative core, but I knew that I needed to monetize on that. I wasn't going to be, the sketcher making beautiful sketches and, that creative zone. It was really like understanding, creativity and commerce and how those two came together. I also had the opportunity my senior year in high school to do an internship with Ralph Lauren, which parlayed into my future career. But I really padded my curriculum with anything business oriented. I took marketing, I took entrepreneurship and enterprise at the Johnson Business School, was sort of like the grandfather of entrepreneurship, and wrote my first business plan in college, which I actually used that book to write the Laundress business plan later on. But knowing really how to craft this, subconsciously craft a future of knowledge that I knew that I was going to rely on and go back to.
So you always kind of had that in you, that entrepreneurial spirit. You had the business mind, but you also had a bit of self-awareness much early on that you weren't going to be, quote unquote, the next fashion designer, but you really understood the business side of it, plus the creativity, and that got your wheels spinning. So you graduate Cornell, and you had the in with Ralph Lauren, which is fantastic there. And so your first job, senior designer for 5 years. What was it like, to work with one of the most, renowned fashion houses in the world? And what were some of your favorite experiences and learnings from that time?
I mean, I call it the University of Ralph Lauren. And I say, I didn't quit. I just graduated. And there's so many amazing graduates, I call them, from, Ralph U. It was just an incredible time and an incredible company. And I really was exposed. I have mentors. My core mentors still today are from Ralph Lauren, but I was exposed to talent and the resources and leadership and just this grand exposure to so much creation, whether you're creating a runway show or a home installation or a store opening. I mean, and I was exposed to many of these different facets in the business, where I kind of bounced around a little bit before I ended up in home design. And it was just incredible to see a collection of people and a collection of vast talents come to create a single purpose. And it wasn't a single act, and really kind of taking that village mentality of aggregating and culturing, your team. Was incredible.
And what do you think it was, that core thread of culture that, well, pun intended, what was that thread of culture that made Ralph Lauren a special place where everyone felt, connected and part of that common goal?
It's like the Kool-Aid was really strong, but we all had, it was a very concrete vision. So we all knew what the vision we were getting towards, and we all knew what the deliverable was. And everyone really bent over backwards to make that happen. It was like the stories are insane. It's like if this team should have been in like heart transplant
The way they get things
business,
done.
the way they got things done, like hoops and
I
whatever.
love it. I love it. And I assume back then, during that time also, you were able to physically get your hands on so many different materials and understand how they're made and how they react and how they adapt to environmental conditions and stains and weather and usage. Is that where you kind of got the first bug that there might be a better way of cleaning from, traditional dry cleaning and laundering, throwing things in the washing machine? Where did that spark come from?
It's funny because I actually found a college term paper I wrote senior year, 1998, called "Are You Being Taken to the Cleaners?" And I actually have a picture to post on Instagram of that paper, which this is what happens when you keep copious files. You find things like this.
Remember we wrote things on paper? Remember that?
I know. It was really funny. Um, but so back apparently I was curious in college. My senior year I did a paper and I remember going to the dry cleaners and interviewing and asking why this was dry clean and why the women's shirts were $8 and why the men's shirts were 2.
Fascinating.
And
I don't even know why that is.
because it can't fit through the machine, the women's shirts.
Fact.
There it is. So it's crazy because the entire paper is essentially verbatim what the Laundress mantra and information manifested. It's the manifesto. It talked about what fabrics can and cannot be washed and why we're all dry cleaning and not laundering, and it's hilarious. But this apparently back in the archives, I was thinking about this, which I didn't recall when 2002. I'm like, I really need this product to deal with my Ralph Lauren wardrobe, and living in a 6th floor walk up with no laundry room in the building, and hand washing in the sink, or taking all my my washables to New Jersey on the New Jersey Transit to my mom's
Carrying a
basement
bag like
laundry
a hobo
room.
on the train
Bag,
with a stick
yeah,
on the
it's
end of
like,
it. Yeah, that doesn't work.
yeah. And then, the fluff and fold around the corner, having, the sheets and the towels and everything washed with bleach every time because like I was terrified of that communal machine, disgusting. And then watching all of my sheets fray from all the bleach, which is what happens
It's a
when you use
lot.
too
It's a
much
lot.
bleach. It's a lot. So all of that sort of manifested while working at Ralph Lauren, and I was driving in a town car as we did back then.
Pre-Uber, I remember that.
Pre-Uber.
Remember we had like we had to get like the vouchers, and you had
The vouchers.
the phone number. You had to call it in to 1-8 Carmel and all the other ones. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like getting paid, minimum wage, but taking a town
But I got a
car
town
anywhere.
car. I remember like my first job, I was making like 33 grand in advertising, but one late night I took a town car back to Long Island. I felt like a king.
Yeah,
Literally.
you're like, I made it.
I did it.
Made it.
I roll up in the town car. I'm like, anyone see me? I'm in the town car. The good
Totally.
old days, Gwen. The good old days.
So the town car ride, we're chatting. I'm talking about my laundry conundrums, and I'm telling him, this is my boss, Calvin Churchman, about this concept and making products that you could wash, your jeans and the cashmere sweaters and get pit stains out and all this stuff. And he turns to me and he says, "Gwen, it sounds like the Laundress." And from there, I came back to my desk a couple weeks later, and he had left me taped on my monitor a photocopy of a course list from the Learning Annex, and he had circled the course on how to start your own laundromat. So, and he offered to pay for my class, actually, which I said, no, I'll pay for it myself, beyond generous. And I went to a class on how to start a laundromat. Not exactly what I needed, but
it's a foundation.
It's a foundation
a foundation.
Get a notebook out and start pen to paper.
And how did we start to get into like the scientific formula and developing the product and the brand, like the actual physical products?
So from the laundry class to getting together with Lindsay and saying, I have this idea. It's in lawn, she had the same pain points where she was dry cleaning like hundreds of dollars a week with her with her wardrobe for her work at Chanel. It was a fortune. It was insane. It was the dry cleaning was costing more than the actual sample sale prices or discount prices, believe it or not. So from there, I reached out. I sent an email. This time I was using Ralph Lauren email because I didn't even have a personal email at the time. And I reached out to this woman named Kate Obendorf, who was a professor, dean at everything at PhD scientist at Cornell. I had never taken any classes from her because she actually taught PhD students who were creating like fibers for like heart valves. Not like undergrad design kids. And I reached out to her and I said, I don't think you remember me. I didn't take any of your classes, but, Lindsay and I were both undergrads and we were working on this concept of making detergent and fabric care. And we have all of these, conundrums that we would like to address, silk and cashmere and pit stains and all these things. And she says, great, of course I remember you, come on up. And that was the invite to go back to campus, go back to Cornell, work with her in her office and do a crash course detergency chemistry class over a weekend.
And that's where you learned everything, the art and
That's where you
science
learn
and
everything.
fabric care. And was the name a slam dunk? Did that have to be the name? Was it the name from the beginning?
It was the first name that was thrown out, and we did kick around some other ideas, but we ended up always coming back to it because it was just like the right thing. And we were very aware, in between 2002 and 4 when we launched that development process, was that while we were two young girls, women, developing this brand for traditionally a female consumer, we came from luxury brands. We did not want to have a bottle or a brand or a product that felt gender specific. We didn't want it to feel girly. We didn't want it to feel like only women would use it. So the design and the packaging was from a luxury principle where premium. You don't look at Chanel and think, oh, only that's so feminine or that's so
it's gender neutral for the most
only.
part.
It's gender. Yeah,
even if
correct.
you look at Chanel No. 5, if you look at the perfume bottle, like it's not overly feminine. It's stoic. It's classic design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was really the angle of not wanting to alienate our audience. So we were always sort of questioning Laundress, but the Laundress is historically the woman doing laundry. And that was a fine benchmark to use. And while the packaging could offset or complement not feeling alienating for, a global consumer.
Makes total sense. So let's talking about, you have the product now. I'm sure you had to, raise some capital to figure this out. Where did you go first? Did you go to friends and family? Did you scrounge up a couple bucks?
Raising capital is a very generous term for what we did.
Asking for money, quote unquote?
We had a for-profit cocktail party, for-profit fundraiser, which is also hilarious because if we just stuck with that model, we could have like founded GoFundMe or crowdsourcing instead.
Funny how that works, right?
How that works. But we had a for-profit party, which we invited anyone who would show up, friends, family, coworkers, boyfriends, ex-boyfriends, dates, anyone. And it was very modest. It was like $30 for a couple hour cocktails at a bar that we used to call Cafe Rosso, which is now Cafe Clooney on the corner street I lived on, 12th Street. And that launched I think we had generated about $5,000. I actually just found the book where we logged every single person who gave us money and sent thank you notes. And that really gave us the seed money to even afford to go to Cornell, to even make photocopies all weekend at Kinko's after we sort of exhausted the free photocopies on campus. And just, we had nothing. We were living off pennies and fumes to begin with. So our official funding came from the SBA, which did an SBA loan, which I worked personally with an advisor at Baruch College, where they had a little SBA, Small Business Development office in the campus, and it was open to the public. And I worked with an advisor who helped, finesse the numbers and the spreadsheets. That was all made up. I mean, it was all
Just
total
to make it work.
fictitious, just
Just
to
to
make
get
it
that
work.
cash.
And we got $100,000 from the HSBC, which apparently they don't really do anymore. You need to have like product launch in business.
I have one. I got one during this time. Yep.
But I think you have to have like
An actual
a
business.
launch first,
Yeah.
an actual business, not
They're not
like
seed
a
round. Yeah, an idea,
seed.
a kernel
Yeah.
of idea. So
Yeah.
now you're flush with cash. And
Flush with
now it's time to
$100,000.
now it's time for the next steps, right? Like how do we make this? How do we go to market? What do we do with this, right? What's
So yeah, so that money went towards our production. So in our business, you have to produce, and there's minimums. So you have stock, and then when you do the stock, then you got to sell the stuff, and then you have to have money so you could reorder more. So it was this constant hamster wheel of
cash flow, inventory,
cash
product?
flow, inventory. Yes, exactly.
But where did those
Shipping
initial
orders.
sales go in? Where did those initial sales come from? Like, how'd you hit the market? How'd you get the word out? Like, was there an early buzz? How much of your experience and connections did you leverage there?
So old school, we launched at a trade show, and we walked away with 10 clients, and it was
Awesome.
a diverse portfolio. We had a client in a store in the UK. We had a store Lavender and Lace, and I think Alabama. We had but we had 10, and we had 10 orders to ship to.
That's awesome.
And that was the beginning. And then Lindsay leveraged some of her clients that she had with Chanel. So on her lunch break, she bullied someone into taking us at Bergdorf. So
There you go. And what was that, moment? Things start to pick up there and you're like, holy shit, like this is real. Like this is real. We have a great product. We're getting great reviews. There's real sales coming in. What was that moment when maybe you looked over at Lindsay and you're like, we're doing this. This shit's real.
yeah, the real factor came when we did take those pennies and hire a public PR agency in the very, very beginning. And the power of media was much easier then because there was less of it. People read the paper, people read Real Simple, they read the magazines.
There wasn't the Instagram influencers out
wasn't
there.
this,
It wasn't
like,
influencer world. Yeah.
Yeah, you weren't bombarded with it. Like there was some key placements, and you got a lot of eyeballs and people reading it. And the first big placement, obviously, like the mothership of placements, was to be in the New York Times style section. And that placement came out while I was still at Ralph Lauren. And, it was like amazing. That's like, oh my gosh, we're real. This is like, to be in the style section was amazing. But there was a woman in a meeting that I was in that day, that Monday, it came out on Sunday. And she's like, Gwen, I saw you on the New York Times. And I was like, of course you're the one who's like bitter and jealous that I'm doing this.
In
Meanwhile,
work hours,
meanwhile, everybody else is high-fiving and super excited. But I did get called out for my moonlighting at the time.
In the end, you do what you got to do in life. You
do what you got to do. The side hustle was not in my contract.
Right. The side hustle wasn't now. So fast forward, success is picking up, and the sales are starting to come in. What was one of the most challenging elements for you and Lindsay as business owners with the quick success? Well, the rapid success.
There was nothing quick or rapid. I mean, it was a slow grind for the 15 years between starting and the acquisition.
Hey Tribe, real quick shout out. I'm really excited to share with you a podcast I recently discovered called The Art of Excellence. The host, Glenn Zweig, does these really engaging deep dive interviews with people who have achieved extraordinary success across all walks of life. He's interviewed business leaders like John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, and has also interviewed well-known thought leaders like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Deepak Chopra. He's interviewed Scott Kelly, the astronaut, another guy who's a top Hollywood stuntman, and so much more. And Glenn has an insatiable curiosity and does a great job of bringing these people to life. You can find it at theartofexcellence.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check it out. Thanks.
There was nothing to speed, because then we also had the financial crisis, bless us in the middle of that. But how we survived was we had the three-legged stool. We launched, let's go back in time to 2004. We launched with a website, with the e-commerce,
Web 1.0.
which Amazon was still selling books practically at that time. So let alone someone shipping a liquid detergent was insane. It just wasn't done. But that was the only way we could reach, national audience. So we could get these, these PR placements or the articles in these publications and talk about laundering and be these laundry experts, which we were, and which the people really wanted to learn, and it was a real need. But they would say, "Oh, what national retailer are you in?" And we're like, "We're not, but we have a website that anyone can order from." So that was a huge leg up. And very early on in the e-com space, we also sold wholesale. So we were at stores, boutiques, nationwide as well. And then we also were international. And it was very quick for our international development because the idea of laundering versus dry cleaning was not foreign in Europe. And in Asia, we were really quick to be picked up. Started in Japan, and then Korea follows Japan, and some of our really big markets. Now it's China, but that's sort of how that progression went over the years. But sort of having this three-legged stool with these three different businesses kind of kept us afloat. So we could, during the financial crisis, when every boutique was going out of business and not paying their bills and disappearing, then we could lean on our international markets that really brought us through. And, the model of we had with them is that, we could collect payables to produce and ship. And,
It's all the cash flow.
Yeah. It's just like, kind of navigating creatively, how to build and get through.
Was there one of those moments, maybe early on where maybe there was a critical mistake that you thought could have cost you the business or could have really taken it downhill?
We there was like so many.
Maybe something you second guessed on.
No, I mean, it was just sort of doing everything possible to make it go. And we did diversify our manufacturing pretty early on when we had a partner who was like not consistent with wanting taking our orders, producing, and payables. So early on we diversified our manufacturing, so we had this constant flow. But what really goes back to everything is, for me, is the relationships and building solid relationships. And I came from Ralph Lauren, where I was demanding these ridiculous tasks from our vendors, for them to stand on their head for a deliverable to make, the installation, or make, Ralph's walkthrough. But they would do it, not because they were even getting paid on time, but because you had this relationship and it was a personal thing. And so I took that very seriously and knew what, how important having that relationship is, and building our vendor relationships are so personal. And being honest and authentic and having that conversation of saying, I can't make this payment today, but I know that I'm going to be getting a payment next week and you're going to get it. Having these honest conversations and building trust gets you so much further than like dodging, or, that's not a way to do business.
Being upfront and transparent, even when it's not what the other person wants to hear, is critical. Because it just sets the stage for, and I want everyone who's listening there to really take a point of this. Gwen and I preach this. It is the foundation for success. It all comes back to relationships. So let's fast forward. How did the acquisition with Unilever come together? How'd that come about?
So, we opened a store, and it was sort of the last tick of the business plan of
brick and mortar.
Of goals. And we were on shelves and we were online, and we had a store that was built in Japan, but nothing was our actual mothership destination. And so it was still this outstanding item that we really wanted the world of the Laundress created, that someone could come to and really experience and see, feel, smell, learn all of that, wash the
So you
vision.
really felt like that physical presence was missing. You had everything else. You had a product, you had
Yes.
sales, you had customers, but you didn't have the feel because
You just didn't,
it was
you
a
needed
brand. It
that
was a touch.
world. Exactly. And, and our original business model was really developed off of these early brands of the early Bliss Spa, where there was
Hmm.
one spa in New York City on 57th Street where you could get your body butter or bath scrub, but you could have that experience in your apartment in Paris, in Japan, anywhere. But there was one destination to have that real experience. So that was still something that was missing. And so and everyone's like, don't do retail. It's a whole nother business model. You suck. It's marketing. It's marketing money. It's your ad money. Um, but I built the store again, going back to my Ralph Lauren friend Rolodex of talent and leveraging, all those amazing people who built Ralph Lauren stores and all the components for that. Um, but that was I'm a little, I guess, like 5 years ago. So we kind of just had this like harebrained, kind of like, oh, we're sticking the fly paper out and we're expecting someone to like walk into it. We never really expected someone to walk into the fly paper. However, that's basically what happened. Some guy from Unilever came to the store,
It
asks
worked.
where I am, and my sales associate like calls me and she's like, Gwen, there's someone here from, I think, Unilever. I think you need to come down right now and talk to him. And I was like, oh my goodness gracious.
All right,
So
let's see
I
where this
said, can you
goes.
can you pass me the phone? And I'm like on the phone with this guy. I'm thinking, what are you just having a shop? Like you buying some things, taking photos? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I think we should take this conversation out of the shop
Yeah,
floor
not on
and
the
like
store floor. Good
offline,
idea.
offline. Good idea. Good idea. So that was a bit kooky, but he was there on a mission to bring us in for a meeting. So that's the fly
So
paper work.
they you put it out to the universe and it came through and was that an easy decision without getting into the financial side of it? Was it a no brainer or was it one of those you really had to think about? Because obviously you're giving up a ton of control. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Not a ton of. You're definitely giving up an element of control and
You're
ownership.
giving the baby over.
Right.
I mean, I don't own that baby anymore, and it was very much my baby. But having said that, the original business plan we expected to be exiting in 5 years. I mean, this
So you
was
have to go back and look at
2004.
the initial
I mean, it
plan.
was like that was the heyday. I mean, Bliss Spa had been acquired, 3 times over, and Estee Lauder was collecting brands like for breakfast. This was sort of the pre-crisis. Every niche brand was hot, hot, hot. So that was our expectation that, of course, our little niche, brand would be on the same hot ticket. And then the financial crisis happens and, everyone, that kind of a reorg of everything. And, which luckily we managed to succeed through and thrive through. But, so, now it's 14 years, we're like, okay, this is,
It's time.
the, you know, I was actually surprised that it was Unilever, because they got rid of their entire U.S. home care division a number of years ago. But they got back in the game when they acquired Seventh Generation. And when Seventh Generation was acquired by Unilever, I felt like I was like left, like that my prom date ditched me because I always wanted to be acquired by Seventh Generation. That was my dream. So it ended up now we're cousins.
It works. And how did that change your day-to-day management of the brand and the company? Did you remove yourself? I mean, how much are you, still involved on the day-to-day basis?
So, we're approaching the end of my 2-year contract this month. So it has been an incredibly interesting 2-year journey. So I'll leave it at that.
On what's next for you? What have you been thinking about? Do you want to stay in this world? Are you taking a timeout, sabbatical shift? I mean, there's not many places we could go right now. Soon.
Um, it's been an interesting process, actually. It's been a very interesting process to, um, be sort of handing off the reins. And I spent 2 years really training and mentoring and harnessing and sort of handing over, um, as much information, as much mentoring and learning as I can to our key team members that are most relevant to what I do. Um, and so I'm just sort of, I'm not out of it yet. So, but I'm a creator at heart, so I'm not worried about that.
That's exciting, though.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a
it's
little bit of the unknown. What's going to happen? What are you going to do? And but now you're in a different position where you've succeeded, and you know the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations, and you can take all those learnings to the next phase.
yeah, and I expect I won't have to grind it out as hard as I as I have used every single muscle group in my
So
body all
so
these
so
years.
going back to that, if you were, on a Zoom call right now, I was about to say in person, with a recent grad coming out of, FIT or the Cornell School who was looking to get into that fashion industry, 2021, what advice would you give this young fashion entrepreneur to really help, him or her make it in this new world?
I have these conversations quite frequently, actually. Um, and I actually feel bad for how much content and how much information and how overwhelming it is, right? With all these resources and every book and podcast and it's just so much information. I mean, when I was my aside from my Cornell business plan book, I had one book on business structure that I read on the Stairmaster at the Equinox on Greenwich Avenue on, like, do I want to be a C corp or S corp or LLC? That was like the extent of reading I did on business structure. Where you could read yourself to death and feel that, you're just not prepared enough. So what I always advise is, really you have to make a list and you have to have your check boxes and your to-dos and all the different avenues you need to organize, whether it is, a marketing or a connection or a cash flow or whatever that list entails, um, and stay focused on that. And if you get stuck, then you go to the next one because it will still be there waiting for you when you go back. And really networking and leveraging as many resources in, have conversations. Don't just listen and read yourself to death, but have conversations with people, because everyone actually likes to talk and help out for the most part.
Right.
I mean, I didn't meet any person that said, no, I'm not going to have a conversation with you. And really having exposure and learning and hearing different things of, whether it, will teach you the right way or the wrong way, but it's so helpful to just keep focused and not get, like the young people now are so obsessed with Instagram and followers and how am I going to get
Instant
followers. And
gratification.
I go, you don't
Short
need a follower.
term.
You need sales. You need sales. You need people to buy your stuff. You need stuff to actually sell before you worry about followers. So just really keeping focused and compartmentalized on the goal. If it's you need a product, you got to work on the product and you got to figure out how to sell it. And then all of that fluff will, surround it. But it's really about where you're going to see, where you're going to get paid from.
That's very sound advice that you give. But Gwen, let me ask you this. What's the single best piece of advice that you have ever received that you take action on every single day of your life?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I wish I was given some magic advice, but I really wasn't. All I know is that I got everywhere with real true grit, and my energy driver is really hard work. It's dedication,
I'm
it's
with you.
devotion, it's discipline. And and from gymnastics background is like using every muscle to get there to move.
I tell everybody that, like, it's work. You have to put in the work. Of course, there's hacks out there and shortcuts, but they're only going to get you so far, and it'll be a house of cards, and it'll crumble at some point. You have to put in the actual work. And what would you say is your true superpower? right? Like, what would you say that makes you just, special in who you are?
I'm a creator. I have a creativity to life, and I use that creativity in every element, from problem solving to my interests to traveling, friendships, earning, jobs, all of that. I mean, applying that creativity in all these elements is really sort of my superpower.
I love it. And when travel opens back up, where's the first place that you're going? What's the first place on your list?
Well, I've been keeping it moving wherever I can. So where it's been safe, I've been. So I was just in Colorado last week and having some adventures. I hadn't been on skis since in like 25 years. So
how'd you do?
The muscle memory is unbelievable.
The powder out there is forgiving for the most part. You're talking West Coast. It's a little softer.
I've never had that experience. I gave up skiing after 25 years ago on my last crappy East Coast experience. I said, no more.
No, East Coast is brutal. Do it to you. And, I'd love to ask, if you could leave us with a personal silver lining and a professional silver lining from the last 12 months. I mean, I can't believe we're talking about it. Like, I remember it was like yesterday, a year ago.
I know, it's
when you started to hear right? Oh, January, there's some virus happening over in China. And we're like, it's fine. We hear about these things all the time. And now here we are in January of 2021. But I'd love if you could give us a personal and professional silver lining.
I mean, the professional silver lining is that there's been a global domestication of people. So everyone, knows now what laundry is like and cleaning is like and how important it is. And, whether you love it or hate it, sort of embracing that and for the laundress, making it a better experience. And the personal silver lining, just some... Well, it's the typical, been estranged, but harvesting other unique relationships that I didn't have before.
I love it.
Like, I've been very close with my neighbors, which has been really fun.
Hey, listen, you get closer with your neighbors. I mean, you're finding new relationships and interests and people that are close to you that you never were before. And it's totally fascinating. And last but not least, Gwen, you look back on those early days of the Laundress, those long nights and those countless hours that you put into it, and you had to look back, and you and Lindsay had to really reach down deep inside, and you had to harness that tenacity to pull you forward, and you had to have that focus, that compass. And then right now, when you're in the final couple of weeks and it's the end of this journey and on to another one, and you want to show gratitude and just grateful for everything and your success and everything awesome you have in your life, Gwen Whiting, what is your North Star?
It's integrity and purpose, and all goes together with the authenticity and the honesty. And if you just have that, front and center, then that takes you to the right places.
I love it, Gwen. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam.
And everyone could find more at thelaundress.com. And Gwen, what's the best way for folks to connect with you and find more?
Oh, on Instagram, Gwen L. Whiting.
Awesome. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us today on the podcast. Please be sure to follow us on all the social media channels, thepodcast.com for more. Remember, take care of each other, stay 6 feet apart, wash your hands, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search The Podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.